I'm John, 34 male. I live in a modest three-bedroom house in the suburbs with my incredible wife, Sarah, and our daughter, Emily, who is just about to turn one. I'm a project manager, which means my brain is wired for timelines, budgets, and seeing all the moving parts of a plan come together. Sarah is a pediatric nurse, a literal angel who spends her days caring for sick children with a patience I can only dream of. Our life is wonderfully ordinary, built around our work schedules, Emily's nap times, and the simple joy of building a family together. It's a life I wouldn't trade for anything. But simmering beneath this peaceful surface has always been the complicated and often exhausting relationship I have with my mother, Eleanor. My mother is a retired English professor, and she has a way with words that can build you up or dismantle you with terrifying precision. For most of my life, I experienced the latter. Everything was a potential critique, every achievement a stepping stone to what I should be doing next. When I told her I was becoming a project manager, she remarked that it was a practical choice for a mind not quite suited for the abstract. When Sarah and I got married, she pulled me aside at the reception to whisper that Sarah's dress was a bit daring for a church wedding. Every interaction was a delicate dance around her ego, her moods, her unspoken expectations. It was a dance I had grown tired of, especially now that I had a child of my own to protect. The birth of Emily, our beautiful daughter, should have been a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. And it was for us. But for my mother, it became another stage for her drama. She offered to come stay with us for a week after the birth to help, an offer we cautiously accepted. Instead of helping, she critiqued. She questioned Sarah's feeding schedule, rearranged our freshly organized nursery to her own liking, and sighed dramatically whenever the baby cried, as if it were a personal affront to her peace. She was a guest who expected to be catered to, not a grandmother lending a hand. After 4 days, she announced she was emotionally drained and needed to go home to recover, leaving us more exhausted than when she had arrived. That experience was a turning point. It was the first time I saw her behavior not just as a burden on me, but as a potential source of harm to the family I had created. As Emily's first birthday approached, Sarah and I were determined to make it special. Not extravagant, but perfect in its simplicity. We planned a small garden party in our backyard. We'd hang fairy lights in the old oak tree, set up a blanketan pillow area for the babies, and order a simple, beautiful cake with a little strawberry on top, Emily's favorite fruit. The guest list was small, just a handful of our closest friends and their kids, Sarah's wonderfully supportive parents, and of course my mother. We wanted it to be a day of pure, uncomplicated happiness, a celebration of the little girl who had completely redefined our world. Little did I know that this simple, love-filled party would become the catalyst for the most painful and liberating decision of my life. A decision that would unravel decades of quiet manipulation and force me to finally confront the truth about the woman I called my mother. It was the weekend my mother claimed to be too sick to celebrate her only granddaughter's first birthday, and the weekend I discovered where she really was. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The planning for Emily's party became a welcome project for Sarah and me. My project manager skills kicked in as I drew up lists and timelines, while Sarah's creative touch turned our simple ideas into something magical. We spent evenings after Emily was asleep painting a little wooden sign that said Emily's first birthday, and Sarah designed the invitations herself, featuring a cute watercolor illustration of a baby bear with a party hat. It felt good to be a team, pouring our love and effort into something for our daughter. The final piece of the puzzle was officially inviting the grandparents. Sarah's parents responded to the text with a dozen heart emojis and a phone call filled with excited chatter. Calling my mother, Eleanor, was a task I approached with a familiar sense of mild dread. I put it on speakerphone in the kitchen while I washed the dinner dishes, with Sarah offering a supportive smile from the table. "Hi, Mom," I began, forcing a cheerful tone. "Just wanted to officially invite you to Emily's first birthday party. It's on Saturday the 20th at our place. We're just doing a small garden party in the afternoon." There was a pause on the line, just a fraction of a second too long. "A garden party," she finally said, her voice laced with a subtle nod. Of disapproval I knew all too well. "John, it's September. The weather is so unpredictable. Are you sure that's a wise decision for the baby?" I could already feel my shoulders tensing. "We'll have a backup plan for indoors if it rains, Mom. It'll be fine. We just thought it would be lovely to be outside." She hummed, a sound that conveyed a world of doubt. "And what about food? You can't just have people standing around in a garden without proper sustenance." "I hope you're planning more than just cake. It's a children's birthday party, not a formal dinner," I replied, my voice a little tighter than I intended. "We'll have snacks, drinks, and cake. It's a 2-hour party." Sarah gave me a look, a gentle reminder to stay calm. She had seen this play out 100 times. Eleanor's questions were never about logistics, they were about control. They were designed to poke holes in our plans, to plant seeds of doubt, and to subtly position herself as the expert whose wisdom we had foolishly ignored. The conversation continued in this vein for another 10 minutes. She never once said, "That sounds wonderful," or "I can't wait to be there." Instead, she offered a series of backhanded suggestions and thinly veiled criticisms. She wouldn't commit to coming either. "Well, I'll have to see how I'm feeling, dear," she said, her voice suddenly taking on a weary, fragile quality. "I've been so run down lately. These old bones just don't have the energy they used to." This was a classic Eleanor tactic. By introducing a vague, undefined illness, she was laying the groundwork. It was her get-out-of-jail-free card, a prepackaged excuse she could deploy at a moment's notice if a better offer came along or if she simply didn't feel like showing up. It also served to make me feel guilty for even asking, for putting such a heavy burden on her frail shoulders. "Of course, Mom," I said, my energy for the conversation completely gone. "Just let us know." After I hung up, I let out a long sigh and leaned against the counter. Sarah came over and wrapped her arms around my waist. "Let me guess," she said softly. "She's not feeling well and a garden party is a logistical nightmare only amateurs would attempt." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "You know her too well. Why is it so hard for her to just be happy for us?" "Because then it wouldn't be about her," Sarah answered simply, and she was right. A week later, after a follow-up text from me, my mother finally confirmed she would attend. Her text was as unenthusiastic as her phone call. "I will do my best to be there for Emily, barring any unforeseen health issues, of course." It was the best I was going to get, and I tried to take it as a win. In the days leading up to the party, we were a flurry of activity. Sarah's parents came over the day before to help us set up. Her dad, a cheerful, practical man, helped me string the lights in the oak tree, while her mom helped Sarah bake Emily's little smash cake. The house was filled with warmth and laughter. It was a stark contrast to the cold, conditional acceptance I'd received from my own mother. As we stood in the backyard that evening admiring our work, I felt a swell of pride. The fairy lights cast a soft glow, the blankets and pillows looked inviting, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Everything was perfect. It was a space filled with love, ready to be filled with happy memories. And despite the knot of apprehension in my stomach, I allowed myself to hope that my mother would see all this, that for one day she could put her own needs aside and just be a grandmother celebrating her granddaughter. It was a hope I had carried my entire life, and one I was not yet ready to let go of. The morning of the party dawned bright and clear, a perfect late September day. The air was crisp, but the sun was warm and not a single cloud marred the brilliant blue sky. "See," Sarah said, nudging me as we looked out the kitchen window with Emily on her hip. "Perfect garden party weather." I felt a genuine smile spread across my face. All the planning, the worry, it was all coming together. Our friends started arriving right on time, their arms full of gifts and their faces full of joy. The backyard quickly filled with the happy chaos of toddlers exploring the lawn and parents catching up. Sarah's parents were in their element, her mom helping with drinks and her dad making all the kids laugh by making silly faces. Emily, dressed in a little floral romper Sarah had picked out, was the undisputed queen of the party. She crawled around on the blankets, her eyes wide with wonder at all the people and colors, occasionally letting out a delighted shriek. She was a beacon of pure happiness, and watching her I felt my heart could burst. As the first hour passed, I found myself instinctively checking my phone, scanning the street for my mother's car. There was no sign of her. The party was scheduled from 2 to 4 and by 3:00 I started to feel a familiar pang of anxiety. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she got lost, though she'd been to our house a dozen times. I excused myself and walked into the quiet of the house, pulling out my phone to call her. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. "Hey Mom, it's me. The party's in full swing and we're just wondering where you are. Give me a call back." I tried to keep my tone light, casual, but my voice felt strained. I went back outside and tried to immerse myself in the celebration, but my attention was fractured. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was her. I stepped away from the crowd again, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm. "Mom, is everything okay?" The voice that answered was barely a whisper. It was frail, raspy, and filled with a theatrical level of suffering. "Oh, John," she croaked. "I'm so sorry. I woke up with the most dreadful migraine. I can barely open my eyes. The light is just excruciating." I closed my own eyes, leaning my head against the side of the house. Here it was, the prepackaged excuse delivered right on schedule. "And this cough," she continued, letting out a weak, sputtering cough for effect. "It came out of nowhere. I think I must have a fever. There's just no way I could possibly leave the house, let alone be around a baby. I would never forgive myself if I got little Emily sick." She sounded so utterly convincing. Every word was chosen to paint a picture of a woman in agony, a martyr suffering alone in a dark room. The guilt was layered on thick. She wasn't just sick, she was sick and heartbroken about missing the party. I'm just devastated, she sighed, her voice cracking. Absolutely devastated to miss my own granddaughter's first birthday. Please, give her a big kiss from her Grammy. I'll just be here resting. I didn't know what to say. A part of me, the part conditioned by a lifetime of this, felt a surge of worry and guilt. Should I go check on her? Was she okay? But another, newer part of me, the husband and father, felt a cold, sharp sting of suspicion. The timing was just too perfect. The symptoms were just too classic. Okay, Mom, I said, my voice flat. I'm sorry to hear that. I hope you feel better soon. Thank you, dear. I'll try, she whispered, as if the effort of speaking was almost too much to bear. You go and enjoy the party, don't worry about me. I hung up the phone and stood there for a long moment, the happy sounds from the backyard feeling a million miles away. I walked back out and found Sarah. I didn't have to say a word. The look on my face told her everything. She's not coming, is she? She asked softly. I shook my head. A dreadful migraine and a cough that came out of nowhere. Sarah's expression was one of pure sympathy, not for Alina but for me. She reached out and squeezed my arm. Her loss, John, her loss. Let's not let it ruin this beautiful day. She was right. I took a deep breath and pushed the disappointment down. This day was about Emily, not Alina. We brought out the cake, a small, perfect confection with a single candle in the center. We gathered everyone around and sang happy birthday. Emily looked at the flickering flame with utter fascination, her little hands clapping together in a clumsy rhythm. When we put the smashed cake in front of her, she dove in with an enthusiasm that made everyone erupt in laughter and applause, getting pink frosting all over her face, her hair, and her hands. It was a perfect, beautiful moment. But as I looked around the circle of smiling faces, my eyes couldn't help but drift to the one empty chair we had set out at the main table. It sat there, a silent testament to a promise broken, a grandmother's love that was conditional at best and absent at worst. The party was a success, our daughter was happy. But the void left by my mother's absence felt larger and darker than ever before. The day after the party was a slow, quiet Sunday. Sarah and I spent the morning tidying up the remnants of the celebration, a task that felt more sweet than bitter. We talked about our favorite moments, the way Emily's face lit up when she saw the cake, the way our friend's son tried to share his toy truck with her, the genuine warmth we felt being surrounded by people who truly loved us. Alina's name was an unspoken topic we both avoided. I had sent her a text that morning, hope you're feeling better today, and received a curt reply a few hours later, a bit still very weak. It felt dismissive and final, a clear signal that she considered the matter closed. We put Emily down for her afternoon nap, and for the first time all weekend, the house was completely silent. Sarah went to take a well-deserved nap herself while I settled onto the couch, mindlessly scrolling through my phone to decompress. I browsed news headlines, watched a few funny videos, and then opened up my social media app. I scrolled through the usual weekend updates from friends. Pictures of kids at soccer games, scenic photos from a hike, a video of someone's new puppy. Then a post from my cousin Megan popped up on my feed. Megan, my mother's niece, was an event planner and always seemed to be doing something glamorous. Her post was a photo album, a carousel of bright, cheerful pictures. The caption read, "Amazing weekend getaway with the best crew. What a perfect day for a wine tour. Wine tour Vineyard Vibes #family." I smiled faintly. It looked like fun. The first photo was of Megan and two of her friends, all of them holding up glasses of rosé and smiling for the camera. The second was a scenic shot of rolling hills covered in grapevines. The third was a close-up of a charcuterie board. I was about to scroll past, my thumb already moving, when I decided to swipe one more time. And that's when my world tilted on its axis. The fourth photo hit me with the force of a physical blow. There, standing in the middle of a sun-drenched vineyard, was my mother, Alina. She wasn't just in the photo, she was the radiant center of it. She was holding a large, elegant glass of red wine, tilted slightly as if she were examining its color in the sunlight. She was wearing a chic, wide-brimmed sun hat, stylish sunglasses, and a breezy linen dress. Her head was thrown back in laughter, a full, open-mouthed, joyous laugh that I hadn't seen from her in years. She didn't look weak, she didn't look feverish, she didn't look like she was suffering from an excruciating, light-sensitive migraine. She looked healthy, vibrant, and utterly, carelessly happy. I felt the air leave my lungs, my blood ran cold, my hand holding the phone started to shake. With a sense of sickening dread, I swiped again. The next photo was a group shot. Alina was there, arm in arm with Megan, beaming at the camera. Another one showed her sitting at a rustic wooden table outdoors, clinking her glass with someone else. The location tag on the post was for a popular winery, a 2-hour drive from her house. And the timestamp, posted 18 hours ago. That was Saturday afternoon, right in the middle of Emily's birthday party. For a moment, I couldn't process it. My brain tried to find an alternative explanation. Maybe the photos were old, but the caption said amazing weekend getaway. Maybe it was from Sunday morning, but she had texted me just a few hours ago claiming she was still weak. There was no other explanation. This was it. This was her Saturday. This was her dreadful migraine. The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it was breathtaking. The casual cruelty of it stole my breath. She hadn't just skipped her granddaughter's first birthday, she had skipped it to go drinking with her niece. She had manufactured an elaborate, guilt-inducing story about her health not because she was bedridden but because she had simply received a better offer. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I stood up from the couch and walked, as if in a trance, to our bedroom. Sarah was sleeping soundly. I gently shook her shoulder. "Sarah," I whispered, my voice hoarse. "Sarah, you need to see this." She woke with a start, her eyes full of concern at my pale face. I didn't say another word. I just handed her my phone, open to the picture of my mother laughing in the vineyard. She stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror and finally to a deep, profound sadness. She looked up at me, her eyes full of the painful truth we could no longer ignore. "Oh, John," she said softly, "I am so sorry." Seeing the truth reflected in Sarah's eyes shattered the last of my denial. The image of my mother, laughing with a wine glass in her hand while I was leaving her a worried voicemail, was burned into my mind. But this wasn't just about one party and one lie. It was about the realization that this was not an isolated incident but the culmination of a lifelong pattern. That evening, after we put a blissfully unaware Emily to bed, Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table in a heavy silence. I couldn't sit still. I paced the room, my mind racing, a detective re-examining cold cases under the light of new, damning evidence. "It all makes sense now," I said, more to myself than to Sarah. "All of it." I pulled out my laptop and started digging. It felt obsessive, but I needed to see it all laid out. I went back through Megan's social media, then my aunts, then other relatives I was connected to. I became an archaeologist of my own family's history, excavating years of buried deceptions. The evidence was overwhelming. I found pictures from a family reunion 3 years ago, one that my mother had claimed she was too overwhelmed and anxious to attend. There she was in the background of a photo, looking perfectly relaxed at a spa day with a friend, a trip that had occurred on the exact same weekend. I remembered the immense guilt I had felt, thinking her anxiety was my fault, that the chaos of family was too much for her. The truth was, she just preferred a massage to spending time with her relatives. The dots began to connect with dizzying speed. I recalled my college graduation. I had a lead role in the final theater production of my senior year, and I had been so proud, so desperate for her approval. The night of the premiere, she called to say she had come down with a terrible stomach bug and couldn't possibly sit in a crowded theater. I was crushed but understood. I later found out from my aunt that Alina had attended a prestigious author's book signing in the city that same night, an event she had been looking forward to for months. She hadn't been sick. She had simply prioritized a minor celebrity over her own son's achievement. Sarah listened patiently, offering her own observations that she had held back for years out of respect for my feelings. "Do you remember when we were moving into this house?" she asked gently. "She was supposed to come help us unpack the kitchen, but she called the morning of to say her back had gone out. We felt so bad for her." I nodded, remembering the stress of that day. "Well," Sarah continued, "I saw her 2 days later at the grocery store. She was lifting a heavy case of water into her cart without any problem. When she saw me, she suddenly winced and put her hand on her back, but I saw her before she saw me." Each new revelation was another small cut. None of these lies on their own were catastrophic, but woven together they formed a tapestry of breathtaking selfishness. It was the casual nature of the cruelty that was so staggering. She didn't seem to care if she was caught. She relied on my willingness to believe her, my inherent need for a mother's love and approval, as her shield. She knew I would make excuses for her. She knew I would choose to believe the lie because the truth was too painful to accept. Her excuses were always about her health, her fragility, her emotional state. It was a brilliant strategy because it made her impossible to confront. How can you get angry at someone who is sick? How can you argue with someone who is anxious? She had weaponized her own perceived vulnerability to get whatever she wanted without any regard for the feelings of those she hurt. The wine tour lie was just the sloppiest and most blatant one of all. Missing my graduation play was a betrayal to me. Missing our house moving day was a betrayal to Sarah and me. But missing Emily's first birthday, that was different. Emily was an innocent baby. This wasn't about a performance or a chore. This was about the simple, fundamental act of showing up for your family. It was about celebrating a new life. And my mother had decided that a day of drinking wine was more important. That was the dot that connected everything else. It illuminated the profound depth of her narcissism. She was the main character in her story, and the rest of us, her son, her daughter-in-law, her infant granddaughter, were merely supporting characters, our needs and milestones only relevant when they didn't conflict with her desires. The pacing in my kitchen finally stopped. I sat down opposite Sarah, a grim sense of clarity washing over me. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound. But for the first time, it was accompanied by a cold, hard resolve. I was done connecting the dots. I was done being a detective in my own life. I knew the truth now, and the only question left was what I was going to do about it. The days following the discovery were heavy with unspoken decisions. The anger I felt was a roaring fire, but I knew that acting on pure rage would solve nothing. What I needed was not revenge, but a resolution. I needed a way to ensure that this cycle of disappointment and manipulation would finally end. The answer was terrifying in its simplicity. I had to cut my mother out of my life. The thought alone felt like a betrayal of some fundamental law of nature. You don't just cut out your own mother. But as I watched Sarah rocking Emily to sleep one evening, humming a soft lullaby, the path forward became crystal clear. My primary responsibility was no longer to be a dutiful son to a mother who didn't respect me. My primary responsibility was to be a good husband and a protective father. I could not and would not allow Emily to grow up in the shadow of Alina's conditional love. I couldn't bear the thought of my daughter, years from now, waiting by the window for a grandmother who never shows up, internalizing that disappointment as a reflection of her own worth. I wouldn't let her learn that love was something you had to earn, that it could be withdrawn on a whim for a better offer. My mother had her chance to be a grandmother, and she had traded it for a glass of Chardonnay. This wasn't a punishment, it was a consequence. It was me, the project manager, finally assessing a dysfunctional system and concluding that it was beyond repair. It was time to scrap the project. Sarah and I had a long, difficult conversation that night. We sat on the back porch after Emily was asleep, the fairy lights from the party still twinkling in the oak tree. I laid it all out, my pain, my anger, but most importantly, my fear for our family's future if things continued this way. I don't want Emily to ever feel the way I feel right now, I told her, my voice thick with emotion. I don't want her to spend her life trying to be good enough for her grandmother. I don't want our holidays, our birthdays, our lives to be filled with anxiety about whether or not she'll show up or what she'll say if she does. Sarah listened, her expression full of love and support. She had never pushed me to this point, always allowing me to navigate my relationship with my mother on my own terms. But now that I had reached the conclusion myself, she was resolute. I support you 100%, John, she said, taking my hand. Whatever you decide. Your peace of mind and Emily's well-being is the most important thing. We are a team, and our little family has to be our priority. Her validation was the final piece I needed. We talked through the logistics, as grim as they were. It meant no more phone calls, no more visits. It meant blocking her number and her social media profiles. It meant preparing for the inevitable backlash from other family members, the flying monkeys, as the internet called them, who would be dispatched to deliver guilt trips on her behalf. We would have to be a united front, firm and unwavering in our decision. We decided that I needed to be the one to tell her. I owed her that much, a final, clear explanation. There would be no ghosting, no slow fade. It had to be a clean break. I spent the next evening writing down what I wanted to say, not a script, but a collection of bullet points, a roadmap to keep me from getting pulled into her vortex of denials and accusations. I would be calm, direct, and final. I would state the facts. I saw the pictures. I know you lied. This pattern of behavior is damaging. For the sake of my family, I am ending our contact. As I wrote, I felt a profound sense of grief. I was mourning the loss, not of the mother I had, but of the mother I had always wished for. The one who would have been at the party, her face beaming with pride. The one who would have held Emily and told her she was perfect. The one whose love was a safe harbor, not a battlefield. Acknowledging that this mother never truly existed was excruciating, but it was also liberating. It freed me from the responsibility of trying to win her affection. Forging a future without her in it was the most difficult decision I had ever had to make. But as I looked at the peaceful, sleeping face of my daughter on the baby monitor, I knew with every fiber of my being that it was the only right one. I was no longer just John, the son. I was John, the father. And my first duty as a father was to protect my child, even if it meant breaking my own heart to do it. 2 days passed before I felt ready. The raw, white-hot anger had cooled into a solid, heavy resolve. The bullet points I had written were etched into my memory. I knew what needed to be done. I waited until after Emily was in bed for the night and Sarah was in the other room, giving me the space I needed but close enough for support. I sat in my home office, the door closed, and stared at my mother's name on my contact list. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my hand was steady as I pressed the call button. She answered on the third ring, her voice sickeningly cheerful. "John, darling, I was just thinking about you," she chirped. "I'm feeling so much better today, thank goodness. That bug really took it out of me, but I'm finally on the mend." The lie was so effortless, so practiced. It was the same chipper tone she always used after getting her way, a vocal performance designed to sweep any unpleasantness under the rug. In that moment, any lingering doubt I had about my decision vanished. This was who she was. This was who she would always be. I didn't let her continue. I cut through the performance with a quiet, firm statement. "Mom," I said, my voice even, "I know you weren't sick on Saturday. There was a beat of perfect silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head as she processed my words and recalibrated her strategy. Her first move was denial. "What on earth are you talking about?" she said, her voice laced with manufactured confusion. "Of course I was sick. I was in bed all day." "I saw the pictures, Mom," I continued, my voice unwavering. "I saw Megan's post from the wine tour. I saw you there on Saturday afternoon." The silence was longer this time. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from confusion to indignation. "Oh, that was a last-minute thing. Megan practically begged me to go. The photos make it look like more than it was. We only stayed for a little while. I was still feeling quite poorly, but I didn't want to appoint your cousin." It was a masterclass in deflection and minimization. She was already rewriting history, turning herself into the victim who was forced to go have fun against her will. "It doesn't matter how long you stayed," I said, refusing to get sidetracked by the details of her lie. "You lied to me. You chose to go there instead of coming to your granddaughter's first birthday, and you lied about why. And this isn't the first time you've done something like this." This was the moment she realized she was not in control of the conversation. Her defensiveness escalated into full-blown gaslighting. "You are being so incredibly dramatic, John. It was just a party. You have always been too sensitive. Why are you trying to turn this into such a huge ordeal? You're trying to make me feel guilty, and it's completely unfair." And then came the final, predictable pivot to martyrdom. Her voice began to tremble with theatrical emotion. "After everything I have done for you, this is the thanks I get. I raised you by myself. I sacrificed so much for you. You would really choose one silly little party over your own mother's happiness. I needed that break. I deserved a day of fun. You have no idea how stressful my life is." I listened to her tirade without interruption. I let her empty her arsenal of guilt, blame, and self-pity. In the past, this would have worked. I would have started to question myself, to feel selfish, to apologize, but not this time. I was listening from the outside, observing the mechanics of her manipulation instead of being caught in them. When she finally paused to take a breath, I spoke, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a sad finality. "I hear you, Mom, but I can't do this anymore. I can't have this pattern of lies and manipulation in my life, and I absolutely will not have it in Emily's life." "What are you saying?" she asked, her voice suddenly sharp with alarm. "I'm saying that for the health and peace of my family, I need to step away. This is the last time we'll be speaking." The line went dead quiet. "You can't be serious," she finally whispered, the performance stripped away, revealing a flicker of genuine shock. "You would throw away your own mother. You made your choices," I said softly. "And now I'm making mine. I do wish you well, but we're done." Before she could respond, before she could launch into another attack or a desperate plea, I said the two hardest words of my life. "Goodbye, Mom." I ended the call. My hand moved with a strange sense of detachment as I navigated back to her contact information. I tapped block this caller. A confirmation box popped up. I pressed block contact without hesitation. Then I went to my social media and did the same. It was over. I sat in the silent office, the echo of the conversation hanging in the air. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt the immense, crushing weight of what I had been forced to do and the quiet, nascent hope of the peace that might follow. The first few weeks after the last phone call were unnervingly quiet. My body was still programmed for the old rhythms. I'd see something funny and my thumb would instinctively hover over the button to send it to my mother before I remembered. I'd hear a piece of news about a topic she was interested in and would open my mouth to make a mental note to tell her, only to be met with the stark reality of the wall I had built. It was like a phantom limb, a part of my life that had been amputated. The silence she left behind was not immediately peaceful. It was loud and jarring. As predicted, the flying monkeys arrived shortly after. My mother's sister, my Aunt Carol, was the first to call. Her tone was one of deep disappointment. "John, I just spoke with your mother. She is an absolute wreck. I can't believe you would be so cruel. She loves you so much and you're breaking her heart." I listened patiently and then gave the calm, firm response Sarah and I had rehearsed. "Aunt Carol, I appreciate your concern, but this is a private matter between me and my mother. My decision is final and it's not up for discussion." She tried to argue, to tell me I was being brainwashed by Sarah, but I gently repeated my boundary and ended the call. A few more messages came in from other relatives, ranging from concerned to accusatory. We ignored most of them. We knew that engaging would only fuel the drama. But then slowly, almost imperceptibly, the loud silence began to soften. The phantom limb stopped aching. The anxiety that had been a constant, low-level hum in the back of my mind for years began to fade. I hadn't realized how much mental and emotional energy I had been expending on managing my mother, anticipating her moods, bracing for her criticisms, navigating her emotional minefields. With that burden gone, it was as if my world had shifted into higher resolution. I was more present with Sarah, more engaged and patient with Emily. Our little family unit, which had always been strong, became a fortress of peace and mutual support. Our home felt lighter. There were no more phone calls that left me tense and irritable for hours. No more impending holiday visits that filled me with a sense of dread. There was just us. We focused on creating our own traditions. We had family movie nights, weekend trips to the park, and impromptu dance parties in the living room with Emily. Life became simpler and infinitely richer. I saw the change in Sarah, too. A certain tension she carried in her shoulders had disappeared. She no longer had to act as my buffer or my therapist after a difficult interaction with a leaner. We were finally free to just be a couple and parents, unburdened by the weight of my dysfunctional family history. Months later, as we began to plan Emily's second birthday, the contrast was profound. There was no hesitation, no drama. We planned another simple party, this time with a bubble machine and a small bouncy house. The guest list was the same, our chosen family of close friends and Sarah's wonderful parents. The day was filled with pure, uncomplicated joy. As I watched Emily toddle through the grass, her face alight with glee as she chased the shimmering bubbles, I felt a wave of gratitude so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. There was no empty chair this year. Every seat was filled by someone who was there to celebrate our daughter, to share in our happiness without any agenda or expectation. Later that evening, after the last guest had gone and Emily was sound asleep, Sarah and I sat on the back porch just as we had a year before. We didn't need to say anything. We just held hands, listening to the gentle chirp of the crickets, enveloped in the peaceful quiet of our life. The silence from my mother was no longer an absence. It had transformed into a presence, the presence of calm, of safety, of healing. Blocking her number wasn't an act of revenge, it was an act of preservation. I hadn't set out to hurt her, I had set out to protect my family. And in the quiet, drama-free life we had built, I knew with a certainty that reached the core of my soul that I had made the right choice.